cloud on the upper left of your screen. So Mary gave us permission to record, so we'll be able to replay it. So if you don't take careful notes, you'll be able to watch it. I'll edit out some of the overhead stuff that we're doing. This is normally a 2-hour program, and so we'll try to do a break, and Mary will control it about kind of when she gets a natural pause point. Wherever she's talking and wherever the questions are, we'll just take a 3 to 5 minute break and come back. We'll try to keep that moving. One of the challenges with Zoom is how to ask questions. So there's a couple of things that you can do. Mary will pause occasionally and take time for questions. So one way you can ask a question is you can hold your hand up and she might be able to see it and respond to it. You can also send me a chat with the question and I will try to field it, and I can either recognize you to ask it or I can ask the question on your behalf. So if you do have a question as it goes along, just do that.
You can also virtually raise your hand by typing in Alt-Y. That will let us, Heidi and I will see that and make sure we get you acknowledged.
Okay. So John Meyer, Charlie's brother. Charlie, I forgot where your brother is. I know he's in the East Coast somewhere. It's either Georgia or North or South Carolina, somewhere in that vicinity. So John, you can mute yourself if you would, please. So we're going to get going. This is Mary May's book, world famous book. Oops. Carving the acanthus leaf, and she just said it was no sweat. It was the easiest thing she ever did in her life. And she had to take a few years off before she does another one, because every writer seems to have that kind of thing. So Mary does a lot of stuff, but she wrote the definitive current book on carving acanthus leaves. Chuck Reinhardt, in the very first introduction to classical carving class that we did, we had a 6-week class, and 3 weeks of those were on carving acanthus leaves, and it was a challenge, and we haven't done one since. So Mary is going to attempt in this nominal 2-hour time to talk about various approaches to carving various acanthus leaves, and talk some and demo some. And I will spotlight her space or body when she's talking, and I will spotlight her hands when she's carving. So she's got a camera set up and she's got herself set up. So I am going to spotlight now her. So now she is going to have control. Can I hear you?
Yes, hello.
Yes, okay. So Mary, you have the microphone.
Okay, wonderful. I was actually just curious, do you have the screen with my close-ups? I don't see it up there.
I do. If you want me to, I will.
You know what, I'm only looking across the top of the screen, so I can't see the whole group. Okay, I was just making sure.
So if I kind of sense that you're ready to show by your hands, I will switch and spotlight your hands. But otherwise, you could tell me too.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just say, can we do a close-up? That's fine. I was going to make a comment about the questions. If you do have a question that's specifically about something that I'm talking about at the time, that's probably when you want to do the sort of alert, because if it's done 10 minutes later, and I'm just trying to catch up on the questions, so we'll try to keep the questions current, and we'll work that through. So well, thank you everybody for having me. I really enjoyed last year being out in Portland, and it was a really enjoyable time meeting everybody. You guys took such great care of me. And Larry's a great host. But I really enjoyed that, enjoyed meeting everybody, and so it's good to be back. Unfortunately, the whole traveling thing isn't happening. I only traveled, well, I've only actually taught 2 classes this year so far. One was in March, early March. It was sort of like when I went through the airports, it was starting to get really weird. And that was the last I taught. And then I just taught at Mark Adams for a week. And masks, temperature checks, everything, and realizing how challenging it can be to actually speak for 8 hours, or no, actually it's more like 10 hours a day with a mask on and try to communicate. So anyway, we got it done. But yeah, so for the next couple hours, I am going to talk acanthus leaves. And it's kind of funny because I just recently, I had to re-edit the book, it was for the second printing, basically. We're going through the second printing, so yay, I made it through the first printing. And so as I was reading the book again and editing it, which is kind of a daunting thought anyway, after writing a book, it's sort of like, oh, I never want to see that thing again. But, but I read through it and it was kind of funny because I was reading through it. I'm like, huh, I didn't know that. Wait a minute. I wrote it. So, like, how quickly you forget. So, but basically, so if most of you have taken the class on the acanthus leaf carving, or at least are familiar with the acanthus leaf, what I find fascinating is that quite often I teach, usually like a 5-day class that I teach, I do one acanthus leaf in that class. And I ask the students whether they've actually heard of an acanthus leaf before, and usually about 50% of the people have said, nope, never heard of it. But when I explain that it is like this leaf that comes down on a bracket, or maybe that leaf that's in a Corinthian capital, or this leaf that is on a picture frame, going around a picture frame or a mirror frame, any kind of decoration like that. Then all of a sudden there's like, this sort of light goes off, says, okay, I understand what you're talking about, just never really had a name for it. So, and when I started writing the book, it was interesting because I was sitting down with Christopher Schwartz, the publisher, and I had not committed to anything. And I just happened to be sitting down with him at the Lee Nielsen open house. And we just were talking, and I said, well, one day I might want to write a book. And by the end of the conversation, I was pretty much signing on the dotted line of, well, what do you want to write about? Well, I don't know, what do you want to do? And he said to me, he said, when you think about a topic that you're passionate about, because if you're not passionate about it, if you're not really interested in it, or if it's just one of these things that, it could come or go, then it's going to reflect in the writing, and it's going to reflect in the book. So I thought about it, and I thought, yes, acanthus leaf. And it hasn't really been written about a lot. And it is definitely one of those historical leaves that has been around since, really the early Greeks. And so it has been, carried out through the various art eras. And I do have a part in the book on that. I'm not going to go too far into that because I'd have to actually reread the chapter. Yes, my memory for history is not that polished. But it's really more going to be about designing, drawing, and carving the acanthus leaf. But as I said, and basically the first place where this leaf was seen in history was the Corinthian capital. And there is this wonderful story, which I love to tell. I don't know how real it is, but basically this architect, Callimachus, this Greek architect, was walking by the grave of a young maiden, and there was this woven basket that was set by the grave, and somebody had put a stone tile on top of the basket to protect the contents inside. Inside was a lot of her possessions, personal possessions and toys. It was a young girl. Anyway, the stone was on top of it, and the basket had been set on this acanthus root. So this plant came growing through the basket, and the leaves started flowing outside in several layers. And this architect was so inspired that that's where the Corinthian capital has been originated from. Now, again, this is a long, long time ago, so who knows how far that has evolved, but I thought it was a pretty neat story. And ever since then, you see it through the history, through Roman, Greek, Roman, the Renaissance, the Gothic period, all over the place. But I want to show you some of the styles, different styles of acanthus leaf. Now it actually is a real leaf, and I'm just going to show you in here a picture of the real leaf. Can we just do a close-up real quick? I think it's probably going to work better that way. There we go. See if I can actually show it there. Let me zoom into the okay, so that is actually a real leaf, and it's about maybe 15, 16 inches long. It's quite large, and this is actually that in it, but in it, large purple and white spikes of flowers come up the center. And so you can see it's highly, this is obviously real. And then if you look at the stylized one, it has evolved tremendously. And I'm going to talk a lot about that because it truly has varied and just changed in so many different directions. So while we're close up here, I am going to do this. Well, this is also called Winchester acanthus and bear's breech. And and actually supposedly it grows in southeastern climate, but I was never able to actually successfully grow one in Charleston. Supposedly they do very well here, but I can carve them better than growing them. So if you look at some of the details on here, I want to show you some other variations. This is the Rococo style, and you can see compared to this and this, they almost look like two completely different leaves, but there are particular details in here that are pretty consistent. First of all, there's what is called an eye. Do you see those holes there? Basically, where this lobe of the leaf overlaps the next one creates kind of a hole area right there. And there's another one there. Here, let me move that a little bit. See that one probably a little bit better. This overlaps that, creating, and then the edge of the leaf curves around and creates this illusion of a hole, and that's called an eye. And then there's also what's called a pipe, that is this raised area that flows down from the eye right there. And so there's another eye there. Let me move it down there. Yeah, trying to get the right, that flowing down there, and another eye there. Okay, now let me show you on the other ones. So you can even see it on this one, these little eyes, okay? The eyes actually create the deepest area in the carving, like the darkest shadow. And just want to show you a few other examples of different types of leaves. But these are all considered acanthus leaves, but you can tell they're completely different styles. And this is sort of more like the Roman style, but again, we've got that overlapping. Let's try to get some shadow on there. Okay, so overlapping, making a hole right there, and then there's this raised area that's called a pipe. And all of these lines, another thing that's real common with acanthus leaves is that all of these lines flow down and flow into that center vein. All of these, everything flows down in that direction. And this is actually a really good example of that one. You see how every single line flows as if it's going to be, I have to reposition that. Sorry. Yeah, every shadow line, every center line, every line will flow down, and that's really what it creates, that flow of everything. And sometimes you can see, like this one, all the surfaces are textured with these cuts on the surface. And some of them, like this one, A lot of the surfaces are quite smooth. So you can see just the range of design is just tremendous. Now this one actually shows some really good detail of the eye. So this overlaps that, all right? And so if you watch this, look real close at this one. So I'm gonna take that, this is the edge, that's the edge, and if you follow that line around, it goes underneath there, and then it connects with that. Okay, do you see why that is actually a hole? Because it's this overlapping that. So if you imagine, I don't want to draw on this, but basically imagine that is actually the lower edge of that leaf. This one might show up a little bit better. So we have that coming around like that, and that coming down and connecting with that. Okay, so understanding what is happening with those lines and those overlapping really helps to figure out a lot of the carving details also. Okay, and let me just see if there's some other ones. Well, then we can get really crazy and wild and maybe more of sort of that Baroque style of, we've got these twisting leaves and curling. This is chapter 16, the final one. But it kind of brings everything together and creates kind of a combination of a lot of the details. And this, oh, hang on a second. This is a Greek style. So if you imagine this going around a Corinthian capital, maybe 2 layers or maybe even 3 layers if you really want a fancy one, and that would be, these would be rotated around, creating a Corinthian capital. So this is very typical. But again, now if you look at this, very, very sharp angles, but it's still, there's still that eye and a pipe, that eye and a pipe. Okay, so those are real typical designs. Not all the time, but that really is one of the most common things that you can see. And this is something that I actually picked up when I was in London, and it was just an incredible thing. I got it in an antique store, I think for 20 pounds or something like that. And you can see this, now it's actually broken, but you can see the edge of the eye, but this is the edge, the overlapping, this is overlapping that, creating this eye, and then there's a little bit of a raised area there, okay? So I just love that design. In fact, I think I'm going to copy this as a lesson. Unfortunately, the little tip broke off of that. But just look at this detail of kind of seeing all of these lines. There's not a lot of surface that's just the plain flat surface. Every bit of the surface has got some sort of texture, but all of those lines really flow nicely down there. They all flow as if they're going to go right to the base of that leaf. Okay, and also what happens is with these lines, none of these lines cross each other. None of them, like this one doesn't go off that way. They all flow, and then they actually all converge and come closer together as they come towards the base. And of course, there's the cabriole leg, just probably if you're into period furniture, very typical design where you have a little bit of an overlap there, the eye, and then you have the pipe, all of this flowing down, okay, the eye there, and the pipe, okay. So the eye really creates an aggressive hole, or the illusion that there's that overlap. And this is just something I printed out quickly. Just some reference points of the different styles. We've got the Roman, we've got the Greek, which is very spiky, the Renaissance, which is much more, actually more realistic, as looking more like the original. The Romanesque, which really veers far from what the real leaf is. So you can see it really throughout the periods they do vary. I think they just wanted to be different in each one. But there's very, very few art periods where the acanthus leaf was not a main decorative design. And okay, so while we are down The close up, bear with me now. I've got this big pile of things. I wanted to show you, let's see if I can do this here. So, I have to open up my book to refer how to do this. Okay, I wanted to show you, because in order to be able to carve an acanthus leaf, it's a good idea to learn how to draw it. And I want to just show you, when I first wrote the book, it was really interesting. Actually, if you want to do the face, I'm going to sort of talk a little bit for the different view. So when I was in the process of writing my book, I have a way of drawing, because I've just the technique that I learned how to draw acanthus leaves was basically copying. And so I just looked at the originals, looked at some of these antiques, and I just copied them. And eventually, after doing more and more and more, this really kind of this formula flowed of how to make that the lines look correct and balance, and this side balancing with that side. And there really was a type of formula, not anything necessarily you could thoroughly lock in and identify as 100% of the time, but so that was really how I ended up drawing. And so every chapter, I've got 13 different leaves, different styles of leaves that I show how to draw and how to carve. And so what I was doing is I showed this step by step by step how to draw a leaf, but I was showing it in the process of how I drew it just by really having experience of drawing acanthus leaves. So it was a real challenge in showing how to get that line. Well, wait a minute. Okay, you draw that curve, but where do you get that curve from? Well, it's just the right one, right? So it was a real challenge to do this step by step by step process. And but I did as good as I could. And then I was at Woodworking in America show, and I was listening to George Walker do a demonstration on drawing curves, that sort of sweet curve, but using a straight edge and a compass. And yes, here it is. He and Jim Tolpin wrote 3 books. This is the specific ones, By Hand and Eye, and it talks about proportion. This is by Lost Art Press. Talks about proportion, talks about using very simple tools to get these drawings. And I was sitting there listening to this demonstration, and all of a sudden my head was exploding, because I thought, this is it. This is what I'm missing. This is what the book is missing. So, because how do you make that nice S, that elongated S shape? Well, you just draw it because it's the right shape. How do you show how to do it? Anyway, open up a whole new avenue of how to explain. And this is to satisfy all my engineer friends out there, my engineer students who just would go, what? Where are you going with that? So I ended up, this was about a month before I was finished with the book, ready to send it off. And I ended up going backtracking, and backwards, literally, have the finished drawing and applying the techniques that he showed, using a compass, getting the curves correct, all of this, and going backwards, and they all worked. That was what was exciting. I didn't have to completely rewrite the whole book, but they all worked, and I could apply all of those techniques to the drawing. So that was the process of, I ended up redoing every single step of the drawing using those techniques. Now, I always encourage people to not rely on that, all right? So get to the point where you understand it, maybe figuring out the curves, and then move to doing the freehand. It gives a little bit more life, a little bit more movement. It's not real locked in and mathematical that way. So I usually encourage people, if you're struggling with the drawing part of it, learn it that way, and then move on from there and start expressing and doing your own designs. Are there any questions that while I'm rambling on? Didn't want to. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing, so we're good at the with the close up there. Okay, so I'm going to show you. I'll show you the technique of doing it. This is going to be a very quick way of showing that sort of mathematical technique of doing this, but it's going to be very somewhat haphazard. And the funny thing is, I actually have to go back. I had to read some chapters on this stuff because I don't use that technique. I had to actually go back and read the book to, oh yeah, that's how to do it. But I'm going to show you two different techniques. I'll show you that setup technique where you want to have very gauged, measured lines, and then I'll show you how to do the same design more of a free form. Okay, so basically, no matter what, you want to start out. We're talking about a more symmetrical design. Okay, just a straight acanthus leaf. So start out with just a straight, just an even shape of a leaf. Then you go down and just make the center vein, or the midrib, whatever you want to call it, that main center there. And then what you want to do, and this quite often it comes thin at the top and then it kind of splays out a bit. And one thing you want to keep from doing is in any lines that you're drawing with this, you don't want to draw any straight lines. This is very gradually splaying out. Okay, you don't want to have anything straight, and you necessarily don't want to have anything parallel. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm going to get the correct drawing here. Bear with me, see, while I read my book. So this, I got too much stuff on my workbench. Okay, can you see that? So first of all, you want to take this, draw. Now, if you're familiar with that Fibonacci sequence where it starts a little wider here, and then as it goes to the tip, it gets a little narrower. So I'm going to be doing, just do some estimate where it's going to be basically each line is going to go a little wider. No, that's not going to work. A little bit more like that, and then a little wider there. Okay, so each one, it's going to, the space between these is going to get a little wider as it comes down. I'm not sure if that's going to work right there or not. Okay, so those are just some guidelines, but slowly, very, very gently getting closer and closer together. And then also I'm going to take these lines down, just straight lines. You can use a straight edge. I'm just, as I said, I'm just sort of randomly throwing these together. But basically, just two straight lines going on each side of that center. And where these two lines, where that horizontal line and that angle line meet, with these three, I'm just going to do a little circle right there. That's where the eye is. Right? And I'm going to leave this, I'm just going to do the one side so we can see the idea. All right, now where is my compass? Oh no. I have no idea. Well, let's just pretend this is a compass. I'm going to take a quarter round and basically line it up with there. All right, so obviously on the center point right there. And what you're going to do is have that compass meet from there to there, and you're going to get a nice, very close to a quarter round right there. It's very easy when you're drawing this by hand without using the compass, letting this go very kind of spiky and straight, but it's important to make sure that that's got a nice arc to it. Same thing here, right? A nice arc like that. So, but it joins in with that and then meets with that. So obviously this isn't perfect because this is slightly off with that. Anyway, get the idea. So then what you want to do is, as you're coming down here, this is basically the top of the lobe. Each one of these is the top of the lobe, coming down like that. And then if you take this drawing, and then this is going to be the eye, it's going to open up. And if you imagine that to curl around, let me get my hand out of the way, curl around like that. And if you imagine it to go under, because that's the little part where it's overlapping, imagine this to continue and then coming up the outside that way. Let me turn it this way so my hand doesn't get in the way. Okay, do you see what's happening with that? That's coming like that. Let's do the same thing here. That is the top of that. It's going to come around like that. And that's where the eye is going to be created. And then if you imagine that to go underneath there, that is going to finish that upper lobe there. Okay, same thing here. And then, okay. And then from that point then, now from this eye, I'm going to take and draw a line there. This is where I'm going to draw that pipe. Basically, it's flowing from the eye, but coming straight, or kind of curving down and flowing alongside that center. Same thing there. But each one of these lines, you really want to make sure that there is at least something of a curve. You don't want to let any of these go straight. It'll just flatten the whole design out, even if it's just a very subtle curve. Okay, and then you want to draw a center vein. And again, it's just a little bit, you want to let it go right to the tip right there. Same thing here. A little bit of an arc, and I actually use my hand as the pivot. I actually hold down here and let my hand go like that. All right. Okay, and then from that point then, about halfway between the tip and the eye, I do a line that basically goes perpendicular to that vein. Same thing here. Right, and that's where that's what's
think?
Excellent pot roast.
You sure? I'm not. It's boring.
Boring? Well, it wasn't to me. I liked it.
I'm glad.
Bailey.
Yeah, you can give her this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now I'm doing these small little lobes here. Okay, right at that line, and all that is, and these also can be used with a circle, basically, because you want to make sure that these have got a nice curve to them. It's easy for these also to get kind of spiky. So a curve like that, and then just extend it. Do you see how this then, you can make another kind of a quarter round curving down. But what you want to do is also make sure that those, if you imagine those to continue, they also flow in that direction as if they're going down towards the tip of the leaf. Okay, and these actually all point towards that center vein. So that points that way, that points that way. Same thing here, right? Like that, and like that. Okay, and then beyond that, well, you can do another one here, sort of the upper area. And then you can even add more. So when you're talking about the real decorative ones that just have a lot of little small serrations, you can add more. Okay, you can add more and add more details. And just, you know, this is where they range and they just go all sorts of different directions. Okay, so now if I was going to be doing this just without you know, sketching something up, but do the same thing. And this is what I would encourage you to practice doing, is just getting the feel for that, and then just kind of do some sketches. And you're basically kind of leaving those sections comfortably spaced apart. How's that for mathematical? Okay, and then coming like that, and you want to have a certain distance away from there so that you have enough room for that pipe to flow. Okay, so there's that, and then there's the eye, and then again, that's coming around like that. Same thing here. And now I didn't draw that angled line, but you see how this actually is getting a little further away as it comes down. So you can figure on that. Okay, so same thing. And after that is pretty much same thing. There's the pipe, from there to there, and then, okay, so after you draw a couple of these and you get to understand now what direction, all the different shapes, it took a long time to sort of figure out all of these little formulas, but there actually is sort of a method to this madness. So now what I wanted to show you is beyond that. Now I showed you some of these that were going, doing some twisting and some sideways shapes. Let me just show you this one here is what I'm talking about. So we've got this one, which is kind of a neat design. But if you look at this, we've got the eyes, we've got the pipe, we've got the eye and the pipe. But what happens with this one, and this is, I'm going to butcher this because I don't speak French, but it's rinceau, R-I-N-C-E-A-U. And basically it's a repeated scrolling foliage. And this is the type of thing that you can see repeated across maybe the frieze of a room, and it just continues and continues and continues. And it really is a beautiful design. And so by having this, basically this is the center of the leaf. The other side of the leaf is now kind of hidden behind, and therefore it gives a lot of variety where it can just sort of twist and bend. And then we've got this, which kind of curls around really tightly. That's sort of that Rococo style. It actually is in many, many styles. It's in the Renaissance, Rococo, a lot of that. Just beautiful scrolling around, but the center of that is going along the outer edge. So you only see one side of the leaf. And so let's just see if there's another. Okay, are there any questions with the drawing of it? At least with that straight one. So I want to show you now another, as you know, that was just a symmetrical one. Now I want to show you, if you take that same idea and you do something like that, okay? And this type of design, that sweet curve like that, that's what that book helped with. Is how do you get that? And after a while, after you use all of the techniques of getting those curves, that's when you get to your hands and your eyes actually get to understand and get to recognize when it is it's that nice sweet curve. Now, speaking of that, I actually am doing a live stream on Thursday, and George Walker is going to be my guest on my live stream. And George Walker is the author of that book, and he's going to be demonstrating a lot of things, packing a lot in an hour. So I don't know, Larry, if you could put up a link to the live stream. It's a Twitch channel, but that's happening Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And so he'll be going over things like this, and he's done a lot of amazing teaching with us. Okay, but I wanted to show you now from that point, you start out, so let's just pretend this is the center line of the leaf, and then I'm going to kind of open it up. Again, it should be based on a general shape of a leaf. That's a very strange shaped leaf, but anyway. Okay, so this is the base of the leaf, this is the top, and you can even do something where it kind of curls around a bit and does some, anyway, that's stretching it a bit. But you can see the shape of the leaf. If you use that same technique that you basically take curves like that and then make the eye and then have that continue on like that. And then you do another one, maybe this way. Okay, so you can see that idea, and then you can do the same thing on the other side. And then, sorry, I think I'm probably blocking it. And then that's going to come up like that. And then you've got another one. Okay, do you see how now you can do the same thing and have it kind of flowing and curling, but now if I take that and pretend that that's actually rolling and flipping, then this is going to be that, what I was showing you before. Actually, this is, let me just do this. Okay, do you see how that is kind of, well, far from it, but anyway, you get the idea. So, and then you can end up having, you know, a scroll there, embellish it a bit, but that's basically the idea. That is how you end up getting a half of a leaf. You can just start. So this then is that area. So that's the outer edge then. And just completely erase that, except I lost my eraser. So to get rid of all of this, and you can have that flowing, curling leaf. And then of course, then you do the more, all the details from that point. This one got a little small. All right, then you do continue to do the, all the details at that point. All right, then you do the small ones, small little sections. Okay, so that's basically how they end up getting those curves like that. Okay, so you know what's interesting, when I teach the Acanthus leaf class, a part of my class, that process, that carving, or a drawing actually, would be probably, could be a week-long class, and going through all of that process and showing how to draw the symmetrical ones, and then showing how to enhance the curves and that type of thing. It could be, I mean, and a week is probably really not even enough for that. It's because it's almost like a lifetime really of learning, because there's so many different varieties, and you could spend, you know, days just on some of the little details of it. But let's see, how are we doing for time? Oh, we got plenty of time. All right, I am going to attempt to carve 2 different styles of Acanthus leaves. I may not completely finish it, but we'll at least get the, I may end up just doing half of it. So let me just see something. I'm going to turn on a side light here. Now, obviously there's no shadow yet, but I'm going to turn on a light. Is that going to show up a little bit better? I think maybe when I actually start carving it. What do you think? Thumbs up?
Good. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, with the, actually it's kind of blinding me. It's like the spotlight. Okay, all right, we will work with that. So bear with me while I take these stacks of things off my bench, because they're all sitting on top of my tools and I can't see them. Are there any questions while I'm moving these? Nothing at all? You're still there, aren't you?
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay. That's a good sign. Haven't lost anybody. Oh, actually, I want to show this. This is a really cool looking Acanthus leaf. This is a an antique, but you can see that flowing up, and then it's actually curling back. Isn't that neat? That was from off of a frieze. And you can see these lines, these texture lines, all flowing down there, all flowing down there. And then you've got the eye, the pipe, really aggressive shadow on that pipe, the eye, and then a nice strong pipe on that. So a really interesting varieties that can come up. And you know, a good way to practice, well, just go online, Google acanthus leaves, or stylized acanthus leaves, or carved acanthus leaves, and then you just get some really good examples of designs, and just draw them, copy them, and just play around with them. Sometimes even when you're first learning, even get some tracing paper. So you can take something like this, all right, take some tracing paper, and just so you get a feel for that design and get a feel for the flow of the lines. And you know, that's because there is that that system to it, that once you get it, then it goes much easier. All right, so let's get pencil. So let me show you where I'm going with this. This is actually the first chapter. It's just a symmetrical book. Okay, symmetrical leaf. It's a symmetrical book too. So if you look at this, we've got that all of the eyes, all right, we've got the pipes. And so it really is just a very subtle design where the overlapping lobes are clear, and then just a simple V cut down to show where the center lines are. And I'm not going to do a lot of real sort of aggressive shaping with this. I'm going to try to, let me just do a little bit of rounding over of the outer edges. Okay, this is just a number 314, just to give it a little bit of a rounding shape, just so it's not a perfectly flat leaf. And you can do this quite a bit more too, if you're taking this, because this is actually a really thick piece of wood for this. Almost a little bit of an overkill for the amount that I'm going to be carving. So this is a number 314. I do a lot of this kind of general rounding with the bevel side down, and just really removing a lot of wood that way. Ooh, the grain is doing something wild there. Did you see that one? Guess we're going lower. Yeah, I kind of felt that one, and I thought, ah, well, it's going to go anyway, so. Sometimes when you feel that, you probably should not push through and stop and turn around and go in the other direction. But this piece of wood has got a little bit of a slant to it down, so I kind of feel that. Okay, do the same on this side, and just do, not really focusing too much on any of these individual lobes at this point, just doing a general rounding. Now you could even take a flat chisel and do this too. Now the interesting thing is, because of that side lighting, all of my gouge marks are going to show up. Now I'm going to have to go, oh no, I have to spend all this time fixing it. See, let me show you. If you don't have the light on there, oh, perfect. Now they just glaring. Oh well. That's the cruelty of the, it's like the cruelty of high definition cameras. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll be in the spotlight and have all of those nasty gouge marks showing. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just accentuate that center vein, right, like that. And as I said, as it comes down to the bottom, it's going to go just kind of open up a little bit. And I'm going to take a V chisel and just go right along that edge. Now what happens a lot of times when you do this is you're going right along the grain like that, and it's going to want to pull you. If something's happening with the grain, maybe it's going off or something, it's going to want to pull you along a lot more than if you're going across the grain. So you really need to get good control of the tool and not let it kind of have a mind of its own. And a lot of times when you're doing that, you might want to just go very shallow the first time through, kind of get a feel of whether it's going to pull you one side or the other. And then also by going a shallow depth, you can always go back then and do any kind of fixing up. I'm just shifting it, maybe moving it over a little bit. You can do any kind of adjusting. And I'm going to go on this side, and hopefully I won't bump the camera. Okay, now that's actually quite wide, so I'm going to do a little bit of shifting over and thin it down as it gets to the tip. Thin it down on the side. So I'm just shifting it over a little bit to get a nice shaped vein line. Okay, and then sometimes I look at it from this way. If it starts doing something wobbly, this is going to be a symmetrical one, so that should be really pretty even. And you can look at it, and I've actually put my face over here and view that way. Okay, and then now I'm going to take, and this is, oh yeah, that grain is doing some very strange things. Got to go this way. And just so it kind of flows in towards that V cut that I made, just so it rolls in a little bit, just to give it some dimension. Okay, and I'll come back and do some cleanup of that. Okay, and I'm trying not to have any kind of steps. Yeah, let me go back with the V chisel and just do one final little cleanup. As I said, any of these, going around the outer edge or even going around this area, I could use a flat chisel too, because it's basically, because I'm using the bevel side down. So it's kind of like using it as if it was a flat chisel. In fact, let me just go grab a flat chisel. Not sure if they're sharp. I've got to go and, so this is just a small flat chisel. So sometimes it'll end up actually doing a smoother cut because it's not, there's no curve to it. So this is just that general shaping before I really do any details yet. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take my V chisel. And I'm just going to redraw some of these because I carved some of it away. Okay, I'm going to take my V chisel and I'm going to go on this side of that line. This side of the line. Right, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to give the appearance that this is overlapping that. So I'm taking my V chisel and I'm going to start a little bit into that eye because I do know that the eye itself is going to be very deep. It's going to be the deepest area and almost look like it's a hole all the way through. But well, I've got some tricks to show how to do that. And I'm gonna have to just monitor this, make sure I don't block it. I'm gonna hold on, close your eyes for a second so you don't get seasick. There, that's a little better. Okay, so from here, you just go right down like that. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm actually leaving that line visible, and I'm removing this with a V chisel so that eventually I'm going to make a vertical cut right along that edge, all right? But what happens is when I make that vertical cut to define the edge of that, it's going to give towards that V cut that I just made, and it's going to prevent anything from breaking. So let me just show you. If I didn't take that V chisel, what I do is go straight in like that and just make a cut. But just the nature of carving and the nature of the shape of the tool, that's a wedge, and there's a possibility, especially in very fragile carvings, there's a possibility that just going straight into it like that could end up just shifting it and damaging some and breaking some very fragile areas. So this is just my kind of security of making sure that once I make that V cut now, it's giving toward, sorry, once I make this vertical cut, it's giving towards the V cut. Okay, so I'm putting it right on that side, it's giving that way. All right, now same thing here, and I'm just making this vertical cut. This is where you just find whatever gouge fits as close as possible along that edge and walk it along. And now this is kind of my cheating way. This is quite a large gouge, and I just have a small one there, and I don't want to go searching for another gouge. Just kind of walk it along. It works. Okay. And then so I'm going to go back and finish up these. And I'm leaving that line visible. I'm going on the far side of that. Same thing there. All right, now I'm going to have to use another different gouge. Same thing. Just, I'm actually connecting that. And then this vertical cut. Now notice I'm stopping before I get to that eye because the eye itself is a little bit different, and I'm going to show you how to work on that. So what I quite often do when I'm doing something like this is if I know that I've got this whole area to do, and I'm going to not do the other side, but if you do the whole thing, you find that one gouge that fits all along the areas that it fits. I've got this gouge in my hand, so I go and make those cuts, and I make those cuts on that side, put it down, switch gouges, and do all the next cuts. And that really ends up just being more efficient in, you know, it's the tool in your hand. It also keeps it consistent because if you've got a symmetrical leaf like this, if a tool fits on this side, it's going to fit on that side. All right, so it ends up just keeping it consistent and efficient. Okay, so I'm just going to go now, and this part here should look like it's going underneath. So this is the lower part there. That's going underneath. And so you don't want to make too much of an aggressive or abrupt curve, but just a nice gentle curve down. I'm just going to stop a little bit before that eye because the eye is a little different. Now sometimes I carve the eye first and then do that. I do this edge. Doesn't really matter. They all kind of have to work together. So whether you do one first or the other, they all have to join eventually. Okay, so give that three-dimensional appearance. And the interesting thing with something like this is you could do this very, very shallow relief, but as long as you have sections of the leaf looking like it's going under, looking like there's an overlap, it gives a lot of dimension to that leaf. No matter how deep it is, it's already sort of showing some type of dimension. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a number 11. Okay, number 11 is a U-shaped tool. It's also called a veiner. The larger they are, they actually change the name to a fluter. So the smaller, I'd say maybe up to a 3 millimeters wide, which that's what this one is. They call it a veiner because quite often they do use them as vein details. But larger than that, they use it as actually making flutes. Now, actually, I want to show you back to that one. Yeah, let me show you back to this one. Okay, see the details on those? Those are not V-cuts, those are actually veins. So the veiners are actually used to make these very, very subtle, soft round curves because the shape of the tool is U-shaped. Okay, but I am going to show you another way to use this, and that's to make the eyes. And the first cut with the eye, ideally you want to make this with 3 cuts. Okay, the first one is like that. It's about a 45-degree angle cut. Doesn't look like 45 from that angle, but that angle. So you're just going to define the curved edge of the eye. Then I'm going to take, this is a number 3, 6, and I'm going to continue, basically connect with that cut, and I'm going to roll it forward, and then I'm going to make another cut on the other side and roll that forward, just push it forward, because ideally what I want is a teardrop shape that comes down to an inside corner. If I just do a straight vertical cut with that, there's going to be a really difficult part to get out. So it's almost like a little chip carving cut right there. And I want to show you, come back and kind of connect that previous area. So I want to, let me just show you a close up with that and show you what we're trying to do with that. You see, so we got this edge as a curved edge there, which is created by the number 11 veiner. And then a cut like this, that way, and a cut on that side, down just at a slight angle so that it comes down into a corner. And I would suggest, when I teach this, I would suggest to have a scrap piece of wood and just carve a bunch of eyes, because you don't have a lot of opportunity to get it right. So go, draw a couple of these, make the cut, and ideally get to the point where you just make a cut like that, and then just pops out. That's sort of that in that perfect eye world. Okay, and quite often when you're lowering this down to kind of blend it with the previous cut, you may have to readjust that edge, just depending, because it does lower it down a little bit. Okay, so again, that. Now, nice thing about this is there's, on this leaf, there's 6 opportunities, so you get a test. You can usually tell the steps. Okay, this is the first one, this is the second one, third one, and by the time you get to the 6th one, you've got it down. You can see the process. So yes, if you've ever done chip carving, that's very, very similar cut to that, or the result is coming down into that inside corner. Okay, and now from there, that's when I want to do that pipe Okay, so from that one side of the eye down, this is going to be this raised area. Basically, there's going to be a raised area that extends down and just fades off and just blends right in. It doesn't actually go right into the edge. It kind of just goes right alongside and then disappears. And I'm going to use the same thing, that veiner. So from here, and this is just going to go start right on one side of that eye. And this actually is a very subtle, it's actually not really wide. Okay, so you need to be careful not to let this go really wide. Just take it right next to that eye. So it actually creates a little bit of an edge around the eye. And with these, with the pipes, you want it to be wider there and then go closer and closer together as it comes down. Same thing as everything else. All these lines, everything is going to come down, flowing down, and basically coming and converging, coming closer together. So the same thing for the pipe. It's funny, when I was teaching at Mark Adams, that was one of those words that I had a really hard time getting people to understand when they couldn't see my lips move. They said, "What is it? A pike? A lipe?" So I thought, a pipe. So I actually had to write it on the board, P-I-P-E. So I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying there. It's a pipe, like a long. But I thought, wow, that's a challenge when you are trying to say something behind a mask. Okay, so that's the second one. All right, so now I'm going to take, and the pipes quite often aren't really sharp like that, so they're more softened. So if you're looking at it, where can I draw this on here? It's more like softened like that, right? Oops, like that. Okay, so it's more, you're just taking off the little corners. So just taking, this is a small number 3/6. And just going and creating more of a rounded, and then as it goes into the other section of the leaf, the rest of the leaf, I'm just going to blend it a little more aggressively in there, because this should really appear to be the highest point. Okay, so we've got the lowest point, which is the eye, and then this pipe should, even though technically it's going to be probably the same height, it should give the appearance that that's this little ripple. And what it's trying to show is, as those are overlapping, it's creating a little bit of a bump where they overlap. So just, it's not something you actually see in the real leaf. It's very much a stylized part of it to give just a little bit more dimension to it. So right here, coming down like that. Again, now this is going to be lowered down so that this appears to be higher than the rest of the leaf. Okay, and then that's flowing down there. Okay, so that's, so I really don't want to see any real sharp, aggressive corners. Now this, it gets a little trickier because it gets smaller and tighter in there, but just do as much as you can. Try to get into it as close as you can. Okay, and so now there's still some flat areas here, and I need to find, lost track of some of my chisels. Anyway, that what I'm trying to do is not leave any of that original planed surface. So I'm just going over this. That's just me. I don't, I want to see everything carved. Okay, so at this point, then, what you can do is you can either start shaping these individual lobes. You can do a lot of different shaping. Again, let's show you the details of this one. Do you see how each one of these individual sections or serrations end up being a hollow, which ends up creating a ridge? And that ridge also should flow down. Do you see this one? That ridge also should flow in that correct direction. So you can just leave it, you can hollow it, or like this one, this is actually a resin casting of it, but you can just have it plain. I'm just going to leave it plain, but you can just take V cuts. And so it really depends on how complex you want to get. I can show you at this point, where would that be? How to do that hollowing. Let's just do it on this one. I'll show you how this is done. So basically, you can come in. Ooh, that grain is really crazy. Okay, in this direction then. Okay, do you see? And that's going to be one large section there. You have to come back in this direction. And then maybe another one right there. Nope. Not going to cooperate with me there. Okay, do you see? Now that's created a nice sharp corner there. So it's not only the V cuts and the vein lines, it's also those ridges. They're important to make sure that they all flow in that correct direction. Okay, so you could do it that way and hollow. The trickiest part about that is really getting those ridges flowing in the right direction. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and just draw a vein line. So normally you wouldn't have, some of it hollowed, some of it rounded. I'm just giving you some options. You pretty much have it consistent through the whole thing. But you see how this comes up there like that, and it flows between these two pipes. Make sure that that vein line, which is the center one of this lobe, that it flows consistent with where those pipes are. If that ends up sort of crossing that pipe or crossing that one or going off in another direction, that's where it's going to look incorrect. So now I'm going to come like that and just take a V. Just take a V chisel and make a nice sharp shadow. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that cool? Now the thing is, you could also use a veiner. I wouldn't necessarily, if you're just going to do one center vein like this, I would use a V chisel, because what you're doing for that is just creating a shadow line. The times when you would use an actual veiner for vein lines is when you're doing a consistent series of them. Maybe 5 or 6 lines down a surface. Because what happens is, like this one, this is a 3 millimeter, it's quite large. If I would use that for just doing one center vein down the center, it would be a little undefined. It wouldn't really create that shadow. It would be more of a curved, a softened cut. So for this particular thing, I'm just going to take a V chisel and just to create shadow. Okay, so same thing on these, and that should go pointing towards the tip of that. And again, this also is going to come down and flow between that pipe and that pipe. And in that direction, curving down. And it's a good idea to position this and make this cut while you can use this pivot and just take and use that curve like that. Okay. And let's just do some small ones there. And if you want to do maybe a secondary one, just a shadow, something. A lot of that, it's just so so varied with what can be done with the details. All right, I'm going to finish off with this one, and there's going to be a center right there. Okay, now there's one little thing I wanted to show you. Actually, that's kind of messy there. I have to clean that up. It's funny, I'm looking at it, but when I look up at the camera, I see things that I have to fix. Okay, there is this wonderful little cut, and I call it the notch cut. And I'm just trying to find the right gouge for it. Yeah, let's go ahead and use this. Okay, so each of these little serrations should have a little cut that actually extends in a little bit and then a little bit further up towards the tip. And I'm wondering if I should rotate this. Let me see if this might show up a little bit better, because it's an awesome cut. I don't want you to miss it. This is when you actually have an audience that can verbalize. You see the ooh, ah. See, I can't hear that now. I need to I need to hear it. I need feedback.
Ooh.
Thank you. All right, wait, I haven't done it yet here, so. Ready? So a cut like that, right? And then a cut like that. Ooh, yeah, okay, well.
Ooh,
Okay, so we're making a cut like that, and then also a cut like that. Okay? So
You missed my jazz hands.
That would work better. All right, let's do it again. So first cut is basically what it is extending there, and it's extending that little thing. And what it is giving the illusion of is that this is slightly overlapping that. That's the first cut. And then the second cut is a little notch out of it that extends a little further up the leaf. And it kind of gives it a shadow appearance. The first cut is like that. And the second cut like that. Ooh, ah, okay.
ooh, ah.
I need something. All right. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to shift this because I keep bumping my camera. All right, so right like that. First one like that. A little bit further up. Okay. And you can do this type of little notch cut, and it will end up creating a lot of dimension, even if it's just very, very shallow relief carving. Sorry about this. Guess that's why I'm not working on this side. Okay, let me hold it up so you can see. Okay, so do you see, there's the ooh-ah cuts.
Nice.
Like that. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get to. So, but it's just very, very subtle, very subtle. And the thing is, what you want to keep in mind when you're doing that, they don't necessarily go kind of a rule that I go by is however far out they go there, I don't bring it in any further than that. So however far whatever space that is, you want to bring it in about that much. If you end up taking it too far, it ends up looking like these are individual leaves. So that's just very, very subtle shadow. Okay, and there's one other little detail that I want to show you. It's kind of another detail that shows up occasionally, but let me just show you on this one. You see these little notches on the pipe? That represents that the eye is actually kind of lifting up a little bit and creating a little bit of a wrinkle along the pipe. And you see it quite often, especially in very shallow relief carvings, because it just basically whoever was designing these originally was trying to just create as much details that would make it deeper than it actually is and give it that three-dimensional illusion. So these are just little kind of wrinkle cuts along the pipe. And so if you imagine this edge would be kind of like curving up and creating these little folds along the pipe. And all that is it's very similar to that little notch cut. Oops. Similar to the notch cut, but it's basically one cut like that, and then another cut like that. And then they get a little smaller as they go down the pipe. Okay, so that's what we're looking for that. So you can see just a little, very subtle shadow, just little wrinkles. Okay, and the only other thing, let's see if I've forgotten anything. The other thing to do is along the outer edges, just in the process of carving it, and maybe sometimes there's some pencil lines still there. What I'd like to do is take this number 3/6 and do a tiny, tiny little chamfer cut along the outer edge. And what that does is it really cleans up that edge, and it gets rid of any lines. If there's any roughness along the edge, it really cleans that up nicely. You really need to keep track of grain direction. And you just go all the way around all the edges, and let me show you a close up of. So you see how that just finalizes that, creates a tiny little shadow line along the edge, little bit of light reflection compared to these, which is just really just that vertical edge. So I do that quite often on a lot of the carvings that I do, is that final cut, especially if there's high edges. It ends up protecting it actually. If you've got edges that will get bumped or snagged, it just protects those also. All right, so are there any questions on this one? Because I'm going to go on to a different design, different style.
Mary, I'm going to suggest that we just take a couple minutes stretch break.
I was going to say, wait a minute, I completely forgot.
Yeah, it's already an hour and a half, but that's also a pause for people to think of questions
Okay.
that they would like to ask when you come back on, before you move on to maybe a next topic. So let's say 3 minutes, and we'll come back.
All right.
Or you don't have to go away. One or the other.
Drink my coffee.
But the question I'm going to ask when I come back is about, if you were carving this out of walnut, mahogany, or any hardwood, what would you look for in a lumberyard for characteristics of wood? So don't answer it now, but that's going to be a question that
that's a great
we'll come
question.
back at you.
Okay. I'll think about it.
Okay. Guy, nice to see you. Glad you could make it.
I almost forgot.
Did you? Yeah. Yeah, it's a fine art. Are you affected by the fires at all in your area?
No, some friends of mine, not right here.
Just to let you know, Guy Hensley is the president of the California Carvers Guild. We just met about 2 weeks ago for the first time. Just kind of out of the blue, but he lives in Ventura, in Southern California.
Sunday was screaming hot here. Today it was almost cold and rainy.
Probably happy for the rain.
Yeah, we're not getting any smoke here, but it's okay.
Unknown caller. Unknown caller.
Who's calling? Is that you? So I got my computer set up on gallery view. We have enough people that on laptops, your computers, screens, you can see everybody. So you might want to think about that just for a few minutes to field any questions if you want to see what's going on. So if you have a question, why don't you unmute yourself and hold your hand up and speak away. So Dennis, when Mary comes back, we'll go with you first.
No, I don't have a question for you. I have a question for you. How do I find gallery view?
Find what? Oh,
gallery view.
So depending on which kind of computer you're on, it's on the upper right-hand part of your screen. It'll say either view or speaker or gallery.
Got it.
But mine says view, and underneath that is gallery view.
Okay, now I've got gallery, I guess.
Okay.
I see a lot more people.
Yeah, that helps a lot. There were about 25 people on for the call.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to get just the speaker view so you can see what the details are.
Yeah. Okay, so Mary, we're going to stay in. Who has a question for Mary? Who has a question?
I liked your question.
Yeah. So okay.
Answer that while I wait for others.
So the question was about woods. So ultimately, there's sharpening and woods and design tend to be sort of generic questions for all carvers. But for Acanthus leaves, if you were shopping for quarter sawn or flat sawn or any kind of sawn, what would you look for? And what kind of hardwoods would you stay away from? Or would you stay away from any?
Oh goodness, that's a tough one. Sometimes you just can't stay away from them. There's been times when I have worked in woods that are not the most desirable, but it has to be because that's what the furniture is made of. Cherry is very challenging because of the fact that there's a lot of kind of squirrely grain in cherry potentially. So with anything, whether it's walnut, cherry, mahogany, you definitely want to try to get as straight grain as possible. If you see any knots happening, turn it over, look at the sides. If there's any knots happening, what happens within that knot is you get this hurricane of grain, and that can really mess around with you. Now you noticed when I was carving On this one, basically it was doing a little bit of a dive down, which actually kind of pulled my chisel and that big chunk of wood came out. Now I knew it was all going to go anyway, but when that happens and you don't want that wood to go, then it can be a real challenge. Now also when you're dealing with harder woods, you're going to have to put a lot more physical effort into making those cuts too. So you're going to get probably on a lot of this roughing out and shaping, maybe not the final details, but a lot of the roughing out, you may end up using a mallet to get a lot of that wood away. Walnut actually is my favorite wood right now because the mahogany that you get right now is really, really mysterious. They sort of lump the African mahogany and the sapele. They lump it all into basically sort of one mahogany lump, which is kind of unpredictable. You end up not really knowing what you're going to get. If you can get a hold of that old, wonderful Honduran mahogany, it's beautiful. But again, you want to be able to see the grain. You want to be able to view it so you can tell what's actually happening with it. A lot of times you end up getting rough cut lumber. Very, very hard to tell what's actually happening in that wood. If you end up getting something where the grain is just going crazy, you're going to have to constantly carve across the grain. It will not allow you to go with the grain. I carved in sapele recently, and that's the only way I was able to carve it. Everything was across the grain because about every quarter of an inch, the grain was basically like this. It would, it just would switch on me. And you'd be going along and, you'd be fine on one area. The other side of the gouge literally was going against the grain. So you carve a, half-inch gouge and you've got a completely switching in on that length of the gouge. And so the only way to do that is cut across the grain. But yeah, I would encourage you, after you get comfortable with using basswood, I really would encourage you to try walnut. I'm assuming you guys have walnut easily accessible there. Yeah, I don't have it down here, but it was great when I was living in Minnesota when, basically they use it as firewood up there. And,
So Mary, there's a second question from John Meyer on chat, and he says, do you feel the techniques you are using can easily be transferred to maple or elm leaves?
Yes. Yes. In fact, well, a lot of times when you've got those different lobes sort of just slightly overlapping, you can use that little notch cut, use those on the little serrations. Use exactly the same technique. I use it on grape leaves. If you're carving grape leaves, they got the little sort of serrations of there. Use that the exciting little notch cut that I use. But you can do that same technique. And also that type of flow that I'm talking about where everything kind of flows in, it just really brings it all together when all the sort of lines flow in all that one direction, or in kind of all flowing down to a certain source to that. But yes, any of those leaves you can use very similar techniques.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I had one. It won't enhance your anybody's carving skills, but Mary, how are you suspending all those chisels? That's not a magnetic strips, are they?
It is. I've been using that technique for probably 6 years now. Yeah, and it works great.
Wow. I'd be afraid that they'd get knocked off too easily.
No, it's surprisingly, and yes, Harbor Freight. Nobody heard that though, right? No, they work fine. They hold on tightly. I've never had any issues. I mean, basically what I do is I just grab them, like, can you see that? Yeah. And pull, and Now, a lot of people wonder whether they actually get magnetized. I've never noticed it. Every once in a while, they might do a little bit of, if they're on my bench and they might sort of go towards each other, but nothing to the point where you're like having to pull them apart or anything like that. And if people get too worried about the magnetization, there's actually something where you can, some machine that can demagnetize things if you're really concerned about that. But I've never had any issue. They're great. They fill up space on my wall.
And they're easy to grab.
And they are, yeah.
You can demagnetize with an old tape demagnetizer, tape eraser.
Yeah.
The old cassette tape erasers.
Okay, there you go. But I've never had any issue. Somebody else mentioned that the concern that they might have is when you're sharpening, that the little bits of metal might get magnetized. But the thing is, I'm sharpening with a water stone, and I'm assuming that just completely eliminates any issue with that. I never had any issue. I suppose if you're dry sharpening, maybe the little bits of metal might do something, but I haven't had any issue. No, it's a great way to store. I've got. They're going all this way and they're going along that way. They're my babies.
Okay,
Thank
Mary,
you.
we'll pause. We'll pause the questions and let you get on.
Okay. All right. Okay, you want to go close up again, please?
I gotta get back there. Hang on a minute. Ooh.
Is it still going? Yes.
Well, for some reason, I'm amazing myself because I've got you twice now. Why is that?
Do I need to start my phone one again, or is it?
I removed it, and now it's. Here we go.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, so let me just show you what I've done here. This is actually similar to the one that I drew, only I kind of simplified it where there's only one of these lobes and there's the eye. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, first of all, this is going to be a little bit more three-dimensional because it's important to make sure that this really looks like it's curving around. And again, what I was saying before, the center of the leaf is actually going along there. The other side of the leaf is behind or looking like it's wrapping around and hidden behind. So let me just show you what I've got here. This is what we're looking for. Okay, it's a little simpler. One of the actual chapters in the book is they call it the Italian Renaissance style. It's got two of these. I just ended up simplifying this because quite often I teach a class and I have to do this in like one day. And so one less lobe makes it a little bit more possible to finish it. And so what I'm going to do starting, I'm just going to take this and make a quarter round so it goes all the way. So it looks like it's going to be curving around to the back side. Okay, so what I do with this type of thing, this is a much more three-dimensional leaf. I do the general shaping of it first, and if there's any areas that need to be lowered, like this part here, I'm going to take this and just lower it down a little bit so it has sort of a high spot there and kind of flows down there. And also I'm going to take it and flow it down there. So you just do kind of a general shaping. All right, and of course by doing all this, I'm getting rid of all of my lines, which I'm going to have to redraw again, but that's okay. Okay, so kind of the process is do general shaping and then you end up going and locating any overlapping parts in the leaf. So just going to take that down. And the reason I take this down now, because I learned when I first started carving, I would get kind of caught up in like finishing up a detail completely in one area, and then I'd move to the next one and I'd completely finish it. And then by the time I moved to the other side, I'd think, oh no, I have to go back and lower that down because this relates to that and it's not quite right. So all that finishing and that completing of those areas was just a waste of time, and because I'd have to lower it down and completely redo it again. So I've really, in the process, I've learned to just do a general shaping, kind of figure out that you're in the right track of the thickness, and especially when it's you're doing it for the design for the first time. If you're first time you've carved a particular carving, and you're still kind of figuring out depth and you're figuring out the shape, really try to resist finishing things until you know that you're fully where you want to be. Right, fortunately, again, that's all going. It's going now. So, okay, so we've got this. Again, this is the high spot, and then it's sort of flowing down a little bit, flowing down a little bit, a little bit of dimension to it. All right, and then I'm also going to take this tip of that lobe there and just give it a little bit of shape as it's coming down this way. So that I don't really have to do much shaping of the leaf. So it's kind of rounding down there. Remember, I don't like to really leave any of that kind of original plain surface. Okay, so once you do that, now you can see all of my lines are gone. And I'm just going to do a redraw some of these. This is that overlapping, and then there's that eye right there. And you see now that, if you imagine that to go under, it should connect with that one. That's where you know that that eye is correct. As long as that goes there, and then this one goes underneath. And so similar to the flat one, or the symmetrical one, take my V-chisel and just lower that part down. All right, and then just define that edge. Okay, now this part here should look like it's going underneath. Okay, so any parts that have a very obvious overlap, and that's about the only one we have that's really where one lobe is overlapping the other. Now I'm going to come in and make that, create that eye. So again, now there's only one chance on this one. That cut like that. And sometimes you may have to use something larger. This is 3 millimeter. It's pretty small, so I'm going to kind of open it up a little bit. And then form that side and on that side. Okay, so that's what we're looking for that. This should be a nice, just a gentle flow down from there. No abrupt edges or corners, anything like that. All right, and then what I'm going to do, this area here, this is actually, it's a really neat little curl. If you look at this, it gives the illusion that this is kind of coming around. This is actually the underside of the leaf. You can kind of see that. It's a little bit of a hollow there. And then it's coming around and it's curling up. And this is actually one of these little lobes, okay? But it's on the end of a curling leaf. So that little lobe or that little serration right there is a little, it's got a little curl to it. And let me just show you, can do, yeah, these are a little bit more aggressive. So if you look at some of these, like this one, you see, this is that leaf, but if you imagine that curling at the end of that leaf, there's a little serration there, there's a little serration there. But you see, this whole area is curving, this whole area is curving, and it really gives that wonderful sort of twisting feel to the end of it. And that's what we're going to be doing on that one. But before you do that, you want to make it basically this half round all the way from there to there. And so a kind of a half sphere. And the more of a half sphere you can do, the more it's gonna, you can do that nice curling illusion. Okay, I'm not gonna do any details on this yet because there's some other things that I have to do for this. I'm gonna back off that light. It's a little bit glaring, isn't it? Okay, so now I just want to make sure I lost my template. So I'm just, so there's going to be that hollow that is going to be right like that. Okay, I'm going to take number 7. Oh, I saw that somewhere. You would think with all my tools behind me all nicely organized that I would be able to find my tools better, but you know. That's that in that perfect world thing. Okay, now I'm going to come down here and just start to take a hollow. All right, and right there the grain switches right at the bottom of that hill. And now I'm going to take a number 7-6, and I'm going to define this as a hard edge right there. Okay, so, but I want to make sure that it stays nice and curled there. All right, and then I'm going to approach it from this direction because right at the bottom of that hill, that's where the grain switches. So I'm going to have to come at it from the side and finish that up. So come at it from here. There's going to be that little area right there that's a real challenge to get clean, but you want to get as much of it as you can and then finish it up by doing one final cross grain cut. Okay. So now at the same time then I'm going to show you how to do that little, it's kind of a, call it a half moon cut, right? And that's going to give that the illusion that that's a little serration, a little curling over right there. So I'm going to make a vertical cut right there, and then make a second cut, a 45-degree angle, and take a little kind of a half moon cut. It's kind of like the little notch cut, but it is more, much more curved shape. And also one little thing, I'm actually going to round that. So again, it looks kind of like this little curling thumb. let me just go back to that one and I'll show you what I'm talking about with that. So like this, okay, you see it's like a quarter moon shape, but this is rounded. That's got more of like a ball shape there. So again, it looks like it's kind of curling in on itself. There's actually a hard edge there, a hard edge there that shows the shadow. And so this is just a little bit larger of what we're doing. Okay, so let me just move over to the scroll. Now, quite often when you have an actual shape of the, the leaf on its own, quite often it starts out in a, with a scroll, because it's just, otherwise it's just, well, where does it start? And quite often it ends up just doing that little detail, nice little design that really creates a nice shape that completes it. So you can have a design all on its own. Okay, now I'm just making a vertical cut there. Now normally, this might work. I'll use a number 7/6 as it gets a little closer in there. So there's a vertical cut, and then what I'm going to do is make a slightly, about a 45-degree angle cut down to that. And then I'm going to do the same thing, curve. So this area is actually very similar to what I did here, only it's a bit of a continuation of that, of this area right here. And these scrolls, these volutes, they also are called, they range. Sometimes they're rounded, sometimes they're flat, sometimes they do a really aggressive ramping up, so there's a high spot there. So that is a whole different thing where you can have a lot of varieties there. Right, now again, there's going to be a point right there where the grain switches, right there. I'm going to try to get as much of that away, excuse me, as I can. But there's going to be a point when I'm going to have to come across the grain to do that final cleanup. And usually what happens in a case like that is you keep trying to come this direction, this direction, this direction, and then this line just moves over and over and over. So stop before you do that and come across the grain and clean that up. This actually reminds me, if you've ever done any spoon carving, if you've ever gotten like at the bottom of that spoon where you just can't get that area clean, that's very similar to that. Okay, so this can be shaped a little bit more, but I'm kind of running out of time, it looks like. So I want to finish up this part. And this is where I'm going to do a little bit more of a notch cut. Let's just draw that center vein. Oh, see, I'm losing track of things. I forgot even to do the pipe. How could I forget the pipe? All right, so I'm going to do that first. There's the eye. And then that pipe then will sort of flow over that edge. So number 11. And just really make sure you get a nice curve to it. And this is actually one, or you can kind of see there's still the saw cuts, but you really want to make sure that there's a little bit of undercut as this curls, and it actually tucks in a little bit to give it some nice dimension there. Give it that illusion that it's actually curling back around. Okay, so now I'm going to just do the same thing, soften those corners. Come back and soften that corner. And then lower the section down. So again, like on the symmetrical one, so that it looks like that pipe is actually higher than the rest of the leaf. So I'm actually taking that and lowering that surface of that leaf down. And same thing here. Okay, so let's see, can you see that? So you can kind of see the pipe area raised. Now, I'm gonna do in the details here, there's a center vein there. Now there's going to be, this is a little different than those other notch cuts where these are a little bit larger. You see how that extends out? So again, what I said before is however far out you go there, you can go in about that far. Same thing here, gone in out that far, come in that far. These are a little smaller. All right, and these all flow in that direction. This side all flows in that direction. That direction. Okay, so they all flow in towards that center vein. And let's see, this one. That one. Okay, can't hear the oohs and the ahs, but I'll just imagine that I'm hearing them.
Ooh,
Oh, I don't know about that. It wasn't quite there. Come on.
impressive.
I guess that'll have to do. All right.
Hill.
Okay, now I'm just going to go back with the V chisel and just do several vein lines down. And this is where you can just take, and they all should kind of flow right along, right down, but none of them actually touching each other or crossing each other. So all just curving around and all coming slightly closer together. All right, so basically the only other thing, except for cleaning it up, is doing the outer edges, because this one in particular still has the original template lines. So that little tiny chamfer cut really will clean that up nicely and kind of just crisp up the edges a bit. So anyway, there it is.
Nice.
Very quick acanthus leaf. So yeah, how's that for timing? Racing.
Pretty good, especially considering how late it is for you.
Hey, I had a big cup of coffee about 2 hours ago, so there you go. I'm going to be up all night now.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, stay
Thank you.
safe out there, and yes.
Let me make a few announcements too. Just one in behalf of Mary. Several years ago, I discovered after the book that she actually has individual videos for each of the 13 acanthus leaves, or at least most of them, on her website. They're separately priced. They're for sale. I decided to tackle an easy one, so I tackled the Scandinavian acanthus leaf. And I got her video and I downloaded it. And what I discovered is I can download it to my iPhone. So then I could be out in the garage, I could watch part of the lesson, pause it, and go on and do the work, and then pick up right where it left off. And that, for me, and my learning style, was a terrific, really a terrific way to do it. And it's like having, a teacher there with you. the guild, when Chuck was teaching the classic Acanthus leaf and his Acanthus leaf, the closest was Mary's Italian Renaissance leaf, and the guild bought her cast, and it's in the Carving SIG library. So if you have, for any of the ones that she has her video lessons for, you can also buy a cast. They're terrific because you can follow along. So if you decide to tackle the Italian Renaissance, it's in the library. I control that right now, but let me know and you can borrow it. Other is that, since we're locked down, the guild owns a lot of tools. The board supported the carving efforts that we have. We have about 200 tools. They're configured in rentable sets, and some of the others are in tool rolls that, for different classes that Chuck or Masa have been teaching. So if you get stuck and need to borrow something and don't want to go out and shell out 50 or 75 bucks per tool in order to experiment, we have some available. The other announcement, these are monthly programs. For October and November, we're still working on them. Jerry Boone, who you can see with his headphones on, is putting together the programs for that. We have Gil Drake scheduled for November. And Gil is a tool maker in the Seattle area, makes really high quality tools. I own some, I know some of you own some. Mostly palm tools, some knives, but he has got a manufacturing operation. And I don't know what we'll call that program. Jerry and I have to talk about it, but to me, it's kind of like an evening with Gil Drake, talking about tools, talking about steels, talking about how he sharpens. And at the Northwest Carving Academy in Central Washington, he also teaches. So there may be an opportunity to learn a bit about it. He's had some health issues, so we're hoping all that will resolve itself. Stay tuned for October. We have a bunch of topics. We're trying to find speakers for that. Eventually, we're going to try to get the twice monthly programs to do I would call like this, a major program, and then to have on the other 2 weeks is to have more local practical kind of stuff that we might do. There might be panel discussions. They might be some local topics. Are there any questions for Mary or for me, so we can partly to let her go to sleep because it is late there. You can hold your hand up or not.
I'm curious, is Chuck Reinhardt there? I can't see who's actually.
Say that again, Mary.
Is Chuck there? Chuck Reinhardt?
No, he is not. He did not make it.
Oh, that's too
Yeah,
bad.
he did not make it.
Tell him
But
I said
you have a lot of your fans here, and a lot of your former students from last fall. So we'll say that. Thank you for coming early, for experimenting with the technology, and for doing what you do.
well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We look forward to having you out here again.
I look forward to it also. Well,
Right,
stay safe out there, and thank you again. Have a good evening.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Have a good evening.
So I will, in a couple of days, I will get the video posted, and Mary, you'll get a copy if you want to watch it again. But
okay.
It'll be on a Google Docs drive somewhere, and we'll get it out to everybody. So I'll end the meeting for everybody, and we'll say good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Larry.